Cap. 66. Blind black girl shocks famous pianist with a song from his past. The Grand Concert Hall in London hummed with a restless energy, a sea of elegant figures draped in black ties and shimmering gowns murmuring beneath the soft glow of golden chandeliers. Warm spotlights cascaded over the stage, illuminating a grand white piano that gleamed like a pearl against the velvet curtains, its polished surface catching every flicker of light. Ayanna Bell, a 12-year-old girl in a simple blue dress, sat near the front row, her small hands clutching the edge of her seat. Her colorful sunglasses rested on her nose, hiding sightless eyes that held a quiet resolve, a stark contrast to the glittering crowd around her. Her braided hair swayed slightly as she tilted her head, listening to the rustle of silk and the clink of champagne glasses, her presence almost invisible amid the opulence. Leonard Hayes emerged from the wings, his tall, imposing figure cutting through the air in a sleek black tuxedo, silver hair glinting under the lights. His stern expression silenced the room, a commanding presence that demanded attention as he adjusted his cuffs with a sharp, arrogant flick. He surveyed the audience, his gaze settling on Ayanna, and a smirk twisted his lips. "I see we have an aspiring pianist among us," he declared, his voice rich with condescension, carrying over the crowd like a whipped crack. A ripple of laughter erupted, heads turning toward the girl in the blue dress, their eyes glinting with amusement. Ayanna's cheeks flushed, a wave of heat rising to her skin, but she remained still, her fingers digging into the velvet seat, her lips pressed into a tight, trembling line. Leonard stepped closer, his shadow stretching over her like a dark cloud, his voice lowering but still piercing. "This stage is for legends, little girl, not for charity cases." The crowd's laughter swelled, a cruel melody bouncing off the ornate walls, filling the hall with a mocking rhythm. Ayanna's heart thudded against her ribs, each beat a drum of defiance, though her face stayed composed, a storm brewing behind those vibrant shades. The air thickened with the scent of polished wood and expensive perfume, the golden light casting long shadows across her small frame as the audience's stares bore into her. She could hear the rustle of programs, the clatter of a dropped glass, the symphony of their disdain, yet she held her ground, a silent vow igniting within her. A woman in the front row whispered to her companion, her laughter sharp as a blade, while a man in a bow tie pointed subtly, his chuckle echoing. Leonard straightened, folding his arms, his smirk widening as if savoring her humiliation. Ayanna's hands trembled slightly, but she lifted her chin, the faintest glimmer of something fierce sparking in her stillness. The spotlights seemed to pulse, their warmth brushing her face where tears had long pooled, unnoticed by the crowd. She remembered the hours at her tiny piano at home, the notes she'd coaxed from the keys with trembling fingers, the dreams she'd nursed in the dark. Now, those dreams felt fragile, threatened by the weight of their scorn. Leonard turned away, gesturing to the piano as if to reclaim the stage, his voice booming again. "Let's leave the real music to those who belong here." The audience applauded, their approval a thunderclap that shook the air, but Ayanna's breath caught, a quiet resolve hardening in her chest. She shifted slightly, her fingers brushing the edge of her sunglasses, a gesture so small it went unseen. The hall's grandeur loomed around her, the chandeliers twinkling like distant stars, the piano a silent witness to her shame. Yet beneath it all, a melody stirred in her mind, faint but growing, a tune she'd carried since childhood, one she'd never shared. The crowd's laughter faded into a hum, their attention drifting back to Leonard as he prepared to play, but Ayanna's world narrowed to the rhythm of her own heartbeat. She pictured her mother's gentle hands guiding her to the keys, the lullabies sung in a voice now lost, a memory that fueled her every note. Leonard struck the first chord, a bold, brassy sound that filled the hall, and the audience leaned forward, captivated. Ayanna sat frozen, the sound washing over her like a wave, but her fingers twitched, itching for the keys. The spotlight shifted, bathing Leonard in a halo of light, his silver hair glowing as he played with practiced flair, his arrogance a shield against the world. Ayanna's mind raced, the humiliation searing into her, yet it sparked something deeper, a defiance she hadn't known she possessed. The crowd's murmurs grew, their admiration for Leonard a stark contrast to their earlier ridicule of her. She felt the weight of their dismissal, the sting of being unseen, but her heart swelled with a quiet power. The piano's resonance lingered, each note a reminder of her own music, the songs she'd crafted in solitude. Leonard finished with a flourish, the hall erupting in applause, but his eyes flicked to her again, a challenge in his gaze. Ayana's breath steadied, her hands relaxing on her lap, the storm within her settling into a calm resolve. The crowd rose, their cheers a roar, but she remained seated, her sunglasses reflecting the light like twin flames. Leonard bowed, his smirk returning, but Ayana's mind clung to that melody, the one she'd kept hidden, the one that might change everything. The hall's elegance pressed around her, the chandeliers casting a soft glow, the piano gleaming in the distance, a silent invitation. She felt the eyes of the crowd, the weight of their judgment, but beneath it all, a secret pulsed, a truth they couldn't yet grasp. Leonard stepped back, gesturing to the wings as if to dismiss her entirely, but Ayana's lips curved, the faintest hint of a smile. The applause faded, the room settling into an expectant hush, and she knew, deep within, that this was not the end. But they had no idea, she wasn't just a guest. Ayana slipped away from the concert hall's clamor, her small frame weaving through the crowd as their applause for Leonard echoed behind her, a fading roar that couldn't drown the ache in her chest. She found a quiet corridor backstage, the air cooler here, scented with dust and old wood, the distant hum of the audience muffled by heavy velvet curtains. Her blue dress swished softly as she pressed her back against the wall, her colorful sunglasses slipping down her nose, revealing sightless eyes that shimmered with unshed tears. She slid to the floor, her knees curling to her chest, and let the silence wrap around her like a fragile cocoon. The humiliation lingered, Leonard's words replaying in her mind, sharp as glass. This stage is for legends, little girl, not for charity cases. Her fingers trembled as she reached into the pocket of her dress, pulling out a small, worn music box, its edges chipped, the once bright paint faded to a dull gray. She wound the tiny crank, and a soft, haunting melody filled the air, a lullaby her mother used to hum, each note a thread to a past she could barely grasp. The music box had been her mother's, a gift given just before the accident that took her sight and her family, leaving Ayana alone at 6 years old. She closed her eyes, the notes painting memories in the darkness, her mother's warm hands guiding her own over piano keys, her laughter a melody of its own. "You'll play for the world one day, my little star," her mother had whispered, her voice a balm against the world's cruelty. Ayana's breath hitched, the memory slicing through her, raw and tender. She'd been in foster homes ever since, moving from one to another, each colder than the last, her only constant this music box and the songs it held. The lullaby slowed, its final notes lingering in the air, and Ayana clutched the box to her chest, her small body trembling. She'd taught herself to play by ear, her fingers tracing the keys in the dark, the music a lifeline through years of loneliness. But tonight, in that grand hall, her dream had been mocked, her mother's words thrown back in her face by a man who didn't even know her name. The corridor's dim light cast shadows across her face, the faint glow catching the tears that finally spilled over, tracing paths down her cheeks. She wiped them away quickly, her jaw tightening, a flicker of defiance sparking through the pain. Why did she come here? To prove something, to herself, to her mother's memory? Or was it just a foolish hope, a child's dream that she could belong in a world that refused to see her? The music box felt heavy in her hands, its weight a reminder of all she'd lost, all she still carried. She traced the tiny engraving on its side, a single star, her mother's symbol for her, a mark of the potential she'd always believed in. Ayana's fingers stilled, her mind drifting to the first time she'd played for someone, a kind foster brother who'd listened in awe, his voice soft as he said, "You're magic, Ayana." But he'd left too, like everyone else, and she'd stopped playing for others after that, keeping her music hidden, a secret between her and the keys. The corridor grew colder, the air heavy with the scent of old velvet, and Ayana tucked the music box back into her pocket, her hand steadying as she pushed herself to her feet. Leonard's laughter echoed in her memory, the crowd's cruel amusement a weight she couldn't shake, but beneath it, her mother's lullaby stirred, a quiet strength rising within her. She adjusted her sunglasses, the colorful frames a shield against the world, and stood straighter, her small frame filling the space with a quiet resolve. The hall's distant sounds filtered through, the clink of glasses, the murmur of voices, a reminder of the world she'd fled. But the music box's melody lingered in her mind, a haunting refrain that refused to fade, its notes weaving through her pain, stitching together the fragments of her courage. She took a step forward, her shoes tapping softly against the wooden floor, her heart beating in time with the lullaby's rhythm. The corridor stretched before her, a path back to the stage, back to the place of her shame, but also to the piano that had called to her since she'd first heard of this concert. Ayana's lips parted, a soft hum escaping as she sang the lullaby under her breath, her voice trembling but clear, a private rebellion against the night's cruelty. The melody carried her forward, a lifeline in the dark, a promise she'd made to herself long ago, to never let the world silence her song. She paused at the edge of the corridor, the faint glow of the stage lights spilling through a crack in the curtains, and her fingers brushed the pocket where the music box rested, a talisman of her past, a beacon for her future. What if she played that lullaby tonight, the one her mother loved, the one she'd never shared? The thought sent a shiver through her, fear and hope tangling in her chest, a question she couldn't yet answer. Ayana lingered at the edge of the corridor, the distant hum of the concert hall seeping through the heavy velvet curtains, a reminder of the world she'd momentarily escaped. Her small hand rested on the fabric, the texture rough against her fingertips, as the faint melody of her mother's lullaby still echoed in her mind, a quiet anchor in the storm of her emotions. She adjusted her colorful sunglasses, the vibrant frames a stark contrast to the muted tones of the backstage shadows, and took a tentative step forward. The air carried the scent of polished wood and the lingering perfume of the crowd, a blend of luxury that felt foreign to her. Her blue dress swished softly as she moved, her shoes tapping against the wooden floor, each sound a small rebellion against the silence that had enveloped her moments before. She emerged into a small alcove near the stage, where a few staff members bustled about, their voices low and hurried as they adjusted lighting and prepared for the next segment of the evening. Ayana paused, her head tilting as she listened, her sightless eyes hidden but her senses sharp, catching the faint clink of a glass being set down, the rustle of papers being shuffled. A young stagehand, a girl with a clipboard and a nervous smile, noticed her and approached, her footsteps quick and uneven. "Hey, you're that girl from earlier, aren't you?" the stagehand asked, her voice soft but curious, a hint of sympathy threading through her words. Ayana's heart skipped, her fingers tightening around the edge of her dress, but she nodded, her lips parting in a hesitant smile. The stagehand knelt beside her, her presence warm in the cool air of the alcove. "I saw what happened out there. That wasn't right. You okay?" Ayana's throat tightened, the kindness in the girl's voice a balm to the raw wound Leonard's mockery had left. She nodded again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm okay. Thank you." The stagehand hesitated, then reached out, her hand brushing Ayana's arm gently. "My name's Clara. If you need anything, just let me know, alright?" Ayana's smile grew, a flicker of warmth spreading through her chest, the first since she'd arrived at the concert hall. Clara stood, her clipboard rustling as she turned to leave, but then she paused, glancing back at Ayana with a curious tilt of her head. "You know, I've seen a lot of performers come through here, but there's something about you. You've got a fire in you, I can tell." Ayana's breath caught, the words stirring something deep within her, a spark that had been smothered by the night's cruelty but now flickered to life. Clara's footsteps faded as she hurried off, leaving Ayana alone in the alcove, the faint glow of the stage lights spilling through the gap in the curtains, casting a warm stripe across her face. She lifted her hand, her fingers brushing the pocket where her mother's music box rested, the small star engraving a tactile reminder of her past. Clara's words echoed in her mind, "You've got a fire in you," a phrase that felt like a challenge, a call to action she couldn't ignore. The hum of the crowd grew louder, Leonard's voice cutting through the air as he addressed the audience, his tone dripping with the same arrogance that had humiliated her earlier. Ayana's heart raced, the spark Clara had ignited now a steady flame, burning away the doubt that had weighed her down. She stepped closer to the curtain, her small frame silhouetted against the light, her senses attuned to every sound, every movement. The grand white piano stood just beyond, its keys gleaming under the spotlights, a silent invitation that pulled at her like a magnet. She could hear Leonard's fingers on the keys, a bold, commanding piece that filled the hall with its intensity, the audience's murmurs of awe a stark contrast to their earlier laughter. Iana's fingers twitched, the memory of her mother's lullaby weaving through her thoughts, its gentle notes a counterpoint to Leonard's aggressive melody. She pictured herself at that piano, her small hands coaxing the song from the keys, the song she'd kept hidden for so long, the one that held her mother's love, her own pain, her quiet strength. The thought sent a shiver through her, a mix of fear and longing that made her breath catch in her throat. She took another step, the curtain brushing against her shoulder, the warmth of the stage lights kissing her skin. The crowd's applause erupted as Leonard finished his piece, a thunderous sound that shook the air, but Iana's focus remained on the piano, its presence a beacon in the chaos. She could feel the weight of the moment, the choice that lay before her, to remain in the shadows or to step into the light, to let her music speak where her voice could not. Clara's words played again in her mind, a quiet mantra that fueled her resolve, "You've got a fire in you." Iana's lips parted, a soft hum escaping as she sang the lullaby under her breath, the notes steadying her racing heart, grounding her in the memory of her mother's love. The stagehand's kindness, the piano's call, the melody in her soul, all converged in that moment, a trigger that set her on a path she couldn't turn back from. She straightened, her small frame filling the alcove with a quiet determination, the fire within her burning brighter with each passing second. Leonard's voice boomed again, announcing his next piece, but Iana's mind was elsewhere, her fingers itching to play, her heart yearning to be heard. The curtain swayed slightly, the light shifting across her face, illuminating the tears that had dried on her cheeks, a testament to the pain she'd endured, the strength she'd found. She took one final step, her hand resting on the curtain's edge, the stage just beyond, a world of possibility waiting for her to claim it. What if she played that lullaby now, in front of them all? The question hung in the air, a whisper of courage that refused to be silenced. Iana stood at the edge of the stage, her small hand gripping the velvet curtain, the warmth of the spotlights brushing her face as the crowd's applause for Leonard's latest piece faded into a hushed murmur. The grand white piano gleamed under the golden light, its presence a quiet challenge that tugged at her heart, the melody of her mother's lullaby still humming softly in her mind. Her blue dress caught the faint glow, the colorful sunglasses on her nose reflecting the shimmer of the chandeliers above, a stark contrast to the elegant crowd in their black ties and shimmering gowns. Leonard adjusted his cuffs with a practiced arrogance, his silver hair catching the light as he prepared for his next performance, his stern expression unwavering. But in the wings, a figure watched Iana with a growing curiosity, his brow furrowing as a flicker of recognition stirred within him. Thomas Reed, Leonard's longtime manager, a wiry man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a gray suit, leaned against a pillar, his arms crossed, his gaze fixed on the girl in the blue dress. He'd seen countless performers come and go, but there was something about Iana, something familiar in the way she held herself, the quiet determination in her posture despite the humiliation she'd endured. He tilted his head, his fingers brushing the stubble on his chin, his mind racing as he tried to place her. Iana took a hesitant step forward, her shoes tapping softly against the wooden floor, her senses heightened, the scent of polished wood and the faint hum of the crowd filling the air. She could feel the weight of the moment, the piano calling to her, but Thomas's gaze bore into her, a silent question that made her pause. He narrowed his eyes, his memory snagging on a detail, the way her small hand clutched the curtain, the same nervous gesture he'd seen years ago in someone else, someone he couldn't quite name. Thomas pushed off the pillar, his movements slow and deliberate, his sharp eyes never leaving Iana as he stepped closer, the shadows of the wings cloaking him in half-light. He noticed the way her head tilted, the way she listened to the sounds around her, a habit he'd seen before, in a woman he'd known long ago, a woman who'd once been part of Leonard's life. His breath caught, a memory surfacing like a ghost, the image of a young pianist with a gentle smile, her hands dancing over the keys, her laughter filling a small studio where Leonard had once composed his most tender pieces. Thomas's gaze dropped to Ayana's pocket, where the faint outline of a small object pressed against the fabric of her dress, a shape that reminded him of a music box Leonard had once given to that same woman, a gift for their newborn daughter. His heart stuttered, the pieces falling into place, a suspicion that sent a chill down his spine. Ayana felt the shift in the air, the weight of Thomas's stare, though she couldn't see him, her senses attuned to the subtle change in the atmosphere. She turned her head slightly, her sunglasses catching the light, her small frame tense with anticipation. The crowd's murmurs grew, their anticipation for Leonard's next piece a low hum that vibrated through the hall, but Thomas's mind was elsewhere, his suspicion growing with each passing second. He took another step, his polished shoes silent against the floor, his eyes tracing the contours of Ayana's face, searching for the features of the woman he'd known, the woman Leonard had loved and lost. The resemblance was faint, but it was there, in the curve of her jaw, the tilt of her head, the quiet strength that radiated from her even now. Thomas's fingers tightened around the pen in his pocket, his mind racing with questions he didn't dare voice, not yet. He remembered the lullaby Leonard had composed, a piece he'd played only once, in private, for his daughter, a daughter he believed had died in the same accident that took her mother. But what if she hadn't? What if this girl, this blind prodigy who'd been mocked by the man who might be her father, was that same child? Ayana's fingers brushed the pocket where her mother's music box rested, the small star engraving a tactile reminder of her past, her connection to a father she'd never known. She could feel the pull of the piano, the need to play, to let her music speak, but Thomas's presence held her back, his suspicion a silent force that made her heart race. Leonard struck the first note of his next piece, a bold, commanding sound that filled the hall, the audience leaning forward, captivated by his skill. But Thomas remained in the wings, his eyes locked on Ayana, his suspicion deepening with each note that echoed through the air. He remembered the star engraving on the music box, the same star he'd seen on Ayana's mother's necklace, a symbol of the love Leonard had once poured into his family, a love he'd buried after their loss. Ayana's breath steadied, her resolve hardening as she pushed past the weight of Thomas's gaze, her small frame moving closer to the stage, the piano's call stronger than her fear. The spotlights shifted, casting a warm glow across her face, illuminating the determination in her expression, the fire that Clara had seen, the fire that Thomas now recognized as something more, something tied to a past Leonard had tried to forget. The crowd's applause broke through Thomas's thoughts, Leonard's piece coming to an end, but his eyes remained on Ayana, his suspicion a quiet storm that threatened to unravel everything. What if she played that lullaby, the one Leonard had written for his daughter? The question hung in the air, a whisper of truth that could change everything. Ayana felt the heat of the spotlights as she stepped onto the stage, her small frame illuminated against the backdrop of the grand white piano, its polished surface shimmering like a beacon in the prestigious London concert hall. The crowd's murmurs faded into a stunned silence, their elegant figures in black ties and shimmering gowns frozen, their eyes wide with curiosity and disbelief. Leonard Hayes, his silver hair glinting under the lights, turned sharply, his stern expression morphing into one of irritation as he saw the girl in the blue dress, her colorful sunglasses catching the glow, her presence an intrusion on his moment of triumph. He opened his mouth to speak, to dismiss her once more, but Ayana moved with a quiet determination, her shoes tapping softly against the stage as she approached the piano, her small hand steady despite the tremble in her chest. The air was thick with tension, the scent of polished wood and the faint hum of anticipation filling the hall as she sat on the bench, her fingers hovering over the keys, the weight of 1,000 eyes pressing down on her. Leonard took a step toward her, his voice low and cutting. "What do you think you're doing? This isn't your place." But Ayana didn't flinch, her sightless eyes hidden behind her sunglasses, her lips parting as she whispered, "It is now." Her fingers descended, striking the first note of her mother's lullaby, a soft, haunting melody that rippled through the hall like a gentle wave, each note a memory, a piece of her soul laid bare. The crowd leaned forward, their breath held, the melody weaving through the air, its simplicity a stark contrast to Leonard's earlier bravado. Thomas Reed, watching from the wings, felt his heart stop, his suspicion from moments ago crystallizing into a shattering truth, the lullaby, a song he'd heard only once, in a small studio years ago, played by Leonard for his infant daughter. Leonard's face changed, his stern expression faltering, his hands dropping to his sides as the melody reached him, each note a dagger to a past he'd buried deep. His silver hair seemed to dim under the lights, his tall frame shrinking as recognition dawned, his eyes widening with a mix of shock and something deeper, something raw and unguarded. Ayana's fingers danced over the keys, the lullaby growing in intensity, its gentle rhythm now a powerful crescendo, the notes carrying the weight of her loss, her resilience, her unspoken truth. The crowd watched in slow motion, their faces a gallery of awe and confusion, some whispering to their neighbors, others clutching their programs, the golden chandeliers above casting a warm glow over the scene, illuminating the tears that glistened on Ayana's cheeks, unnoticed by all but the piano. Leonard staggered back, his hand reaching for the edge of the stage for support, his breath shallow as the melody unfolded, a song he'd composed in a moment of love, a song he'd played for his daughter, a daughter he believed had died in the accident that took her mother. His voice broke as he whispered, "It can't be," but the words were lost in the music, Ayana's playing a revelation that needed no words. Her small frame seemed to grow on the stage, her blue dress a beacon of quiet strength, the colorful sunglasses a symbol of her defiance, her music a bridge to a past Leonard had tried to forget. The lullaby reached its peak, the final notes hanging in the air like a question, a plea, a truth that could not be denied. Ayana's hands stilled, her chest rising and falling with the effort, her face serene despite the storm of emotions within her. The crowd erupted into applause, a thunderous roar that shook the hall, but Leonard remained frozen, his eyes locked on Ayana, his mind racing with memories he'd buried, the star-engraved music box, the laughter of a woman he'd loved, the daughter he'd lost. Thomas stepped forward from the wings, his sharp eyes glistening with unshed tears, his suspicion now a certainty, his voice barely a whisper as he said to himself, "She's his daughter." Ayana turned her head slightly, her sunglasses reflecting the light, her expression calm but resolute, the weight of her revelation settling over the hall like a gentle fog. The crowd's applause continued, some rising to their feet, their earlier mockery forgotten in the wake of her talent, her truth. Leonard's hand trembled as he took a step toward her, his stern facade crumbling, his voice hoarse as he spoke, "That song, how do you know that song?" Ayana's lips curved into a faint smile, her voice soft but clear, carrying over the fading applause. "My mother taught it to me, before she died. She said it was from my father." The words hung in the air, a bombshell that silenced the hall, the golden light casting long shadows across Leonard's face, where regret and realization battled for dominance. The piano stood between them, a silent witness to the reunion, its keys still warm from Ayana's touch, the melody of the lullaby echoing in the minds of everyone present. The crowd's whispers grew, their eyes darting between Ayana and Leonard, the truth sinking in, a cinematic twist that left them breathless. Ayana's small hand rested on the piano, her mother's music box heavy in her pocket, a talisman of the past that had brought her here, to this moment, to this stage where she'd claimed her place. Leonard's gaze softened, his arrogance stripped away, replaced by a vulnerability he'd never shown the world, a father facing the daughter he'd thought he'd lost forever. The spotlights dimmed slightly, the chandeliers casting a softer glow, the hall holding its breath as the weight of the revelation settled over them all. What would Leonard do now, faced with the truth he couldn't deny? Ayana sat still at the grand white piano, her small hands resting lightly on the keys, the final notes of her mother's lullaby fading into the hushed air of the London concert hall. The golden spotlights cast a warm glow across her face, where tears had dried into faint traces, her colorful sunglasses reflecting the light like twin flames. The crowd remained on its feet, their applause a thunderous wave that rolled through the elegant sea of black ties and shimmering gowns, but the sound felt distant to her, her focus locked on Leonard Hayes standing before her, his tall frame trembling, his silver hair dulled by the weight of his shock. His stern expression had crumbled, replaced by a vulnerability that left his face exposed, his eyes wide with the realization of her words, the song he'd composed for a daughter he'd believed dead. He took a hesitant step forward, his polished shoes scuffing the stage, his hand reaching out as if to touch her but stopping short, hanging in the air like a plea. The hall fell silent, the chandeliers above twinkling softly, their light catching the stunned faces of the audience, some whispering to each other, others staring in awe at the girl in the blue dress. Leonard's voice broke the stillness, hoarse and unsteady. "That song, it was mine. I wrote it for her." His gaze dropped to Ayanna, searching her face for the truth, the resemblance to the woman he'd loved, the child he'd lost. Ayanna nodded, her head tilting slightly, her voice soft but firm. "My mother sang it to me every night, until she was gone." The words hung between them, a bridge across years of separation, and the crowd's murmurs grew, their earlier mockery replaced by a reverence that thickened the air. Thomas Reed stepped from the wings, his sharp eyes glistening, his gray suit wrinkled from the tension of the moment, his presence a quiet confirmation of the truth. He placed a hand on Leonard's shoulder, his voice low. "She's telling the truth, Leonard. I see it now." Leonard's shoulders slumped, his arrogance dissolving into a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of decades, his hand falling to his side as he looked at Ayanna with a mixture of shame and wonder. The audience shifted, their gazes softening, some lowering their heads as if to atone for their laughter, others exchanging glances of regret. A woman in the front row, her gown shimmering under the lights, leaned toward her companion, her voice a whisper. "We were wrong about her." The man beside her nodded, his bow tie slightly askew, his eyes fixed on Ayanna with newfound respect. Ayanna remained composed, her small frame radiating a quiet dignity, her fingers tracing the edge of the piano as if grounding herself in the moment. She didn't seek vengeance, her expression serene despite the storm she'd unleashed, her sunglasses hiding the tears that threatened to fall again. Leonard sank onto a nearby chair, his tuxedo creasing, his hands trembling as he covered his face, the sound of his ragged breathing audible in the silence. The crowd watched, their applause fading into a respectful hush, the golden chandeliers casting a gentle light over the scene, the piano a silent witness to the reconciliation unfolding before them. Thomas knelt beside Leonard, his voice steady but kind. "You've got a chance to make this right." Leonard lifted his head, his eyes meeting Ayanna's, a flicker of hope breaking through his regret, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't know. I thought you were gone." Ayanna's lips curved into a faint smile, her head tilting as she listened to the sincerity in his tone, the years of pain easing slightly under the weight of his words. The hall seemed to breathe with them, the air softening, the scent of polished wood mingling with the faint floral notes of the audience's perfumes. A young boy in the second row, his tuxedo too big for his small frame, leaned forward, his eyes wide with admiration, his voice cutting through the quiet. "She's amazing." His mother hushed him, but the boy persisted, his words carrying to the stage. "No one's ever played like that." Ayanna turned her head toward the sound, her smile widening, the boy's innocence a balm to the night's wounds. Leonard watched the exchange, his hands clenching in his lap, the shame of his earlier words etched into his features, but Ayanna's grace softened the edges of his guilt. She rose from the bench, her movements slow and deliberate, her blue dress swaying as she stepped toward him, her small hand extended in a gesture of peace. The crowd held its breath, the spotlights shifting to follow her, the chandeliers above casting a halo of light around her small figure. Leonard hesitated, then took her hand, his grip gentle, his eyes glistening with unshed tears, a father meeting his daughter for the first time in a way that transcended years of absence. The audience sighed collectively, their earlier disdain replaced by a quiet awe, the hall transforming into a space of healing rather than judgment. Thomas stepped back, his sharp eyes softening, a smile tugging at his lips as he watched the reunion unfold. Ayanna's voice broke the silence, soft but clear. "I came to play for you, to show you I'm here." Leonard's breath hitched, his hand tightening around hers, the weight of his mistakes palpable, but her words offered a lifeline he hadn't expected. The crowd remained standing, their applause returning, a gentle rhythm that underscored the moment, the golden light bathing the stage in warmth. Ayanna stood tall, her small frame a symbol of resilience, her sunglasses reflecting the crowd's newfound respect, her heart steady despite the chaos she'd stirred. Leonard rose, his posture straightening, his arrogance replaced by a humble dignity, his eyes never leaving her face, the truth of her identity settling into his soul. The piano gleamed behind them, its keys silent but potent, a testament to the music that had brought them together. The hall's elegance pressed around them, the chandeliers twinkling like stars, the audience a witness to a redemption they hadn't anticipated. But what would this truth mean for the man who dismissed her so cruelly? Iana stood hand in hand with Leonard, the grand white piano gleaming behind them under the warm glow of the London concert hall's spotlights, its polished surface reflecting the golden light that bathed the stage. The crowd's gentle applause lingered, a soft rhythm that filled the air with a sense of awe, their elegant figures in black ties and shimmering gowns watching with rapt attention, the earlier mockery replaced by a reverent hush. Leonard's silver hair caught the light, his tall frame no longer imposing but softened by the vulnerability in his eyes, his hand trembling slightly in hers, a father grappling with the daughter he'd just rediscovered. Iana's blue dress swayed as she turned her head toward the audience, her colorful sunglasses hiding the tears that threatened to spill, her small frame radiating a quiet strength that seemed to steady the room. The chandeliers above twinkled like distant stars, casting a halo over the scene, the scent of polished wood and floral perfumes weaving through the air. A young boy in the second row, his oversized tuxedo slipping off one shoulder, rose to his feet, his eyes wide with admiration, his small voice cutting through the stillness. "Because of you, I believe I matter too." The words hung in the air, a declaration that silenced the crowd, their heads turning toward the boy, his mother reaching to pull him back but pausing, her own eyes glistening. Iana tilted her head toward the sound, a faint smile curving her lips, the boy's innocence striking a chord deep within her, a mirror to the hope she'd carried through years of loneliness. Leonard's breath hitched, his gaze shifting from Iana to the boy, the weight of his earlier arrogance crashing down, his hand tightening around hers as if to anchor himself. The boy stepped forward, his shoes scuffing the carpeted aisle, his voice trembling but resolute. "I play too, but no one listens. You showed me they might someday." Iana's heart swelled, the boy's words a gift she hadn't expected, a validation of the music she'd poured onto the stage, the music that had brought her father back to her. She released Leonard's hand, stepping toward the edge of the stage, her small frame illuminated by the spotlights, her sunglasses catching the light as she knelt to his level. "Keep playing," she said, her voice soft but firm, "your song matters, just like mine." The boy nodded, his eyes shining, his mother wiping a tear as she joined him, her hand resting on his shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of Iana's impact. The crowd murmured, their earlier disdain transformed into a shared reverence, the hall pulsing with a new energy, the chandeliers casting a gentle glow over the scene. Leonard watched, his stern facade gone, replaced by a humbled awe, his hands clenching at his sides as he processed the boy's words, the lesson Iana had unknowingly taught. Thomas Reed stood in the wings, his sharp eyes softening, a smile tugging at his lips as he observed the exchange, the manager who'd suspected the truth now witnessing its ripple effect. The boy returned to his seat, his mother whispering to him, but his gaze remained on Iana, a spark of inspiration igniting in his small frame. Iana rose, her blue dress swaying, her fingers brushing the pocket where her mother's music box rested, the star engraving a silent witness to the moment. She turned back to Leonard, her expression calm but resolute, the bond between them fragile yet growing. "You heard him," she said, her voice carrying over the hushed crowd, "music can heal, even when we don't know it." Leonard's eyes met hers, a flicker of understanding passing between them, the arrogance he'd worn like armor stripped away by her grace, by the boy's words, by the truth she'd revealed. The audience leaned forward, their breaths held, the golden light casting long shadows across the stage, the piano a silent partner in the reckoning unfolding before them. A young woman in the third row, her gown shimmering under the lights, stood, her voice trembling as she spoke. "I laughed at you earlier. I'm sorry. Your music changed me." Her words sparked a murmur, others nodding, their earlier judgment giving way to gratitude, the hall transforming into a space of reflection. Iana's smile widened, her small hand reaching out as if to embrace the crowd, her sunglasses reflecting their newfound respect, her heart steady despite the emotions swirling within her. Leonard stepped closer, his tall frame shadowing her briefly, his voice low but clear. I was wrong, Ayana. Your music, it's more than I ever gave it credit for. The admission hung in the air, a confession that silenced the room, the chandeliers twinkling above as if in approval, the scent of polished wood mingling with the warmth of the moment. The boy clapped, his small hands a solitary rhythm that grew as others joined, the applause a gentle wave that washed over the stage, a testament to the healing Ayana had sparked. She turned to Leonard, her head tilting, her voice soft. Maybe we can play together, show them what music can do. Leonard's eyes glistened, a nod breaking through his composure, the father and daughter united by a shared melody, a shared future. The crowd rose again, their applause a roar that shook the hall, the golden light bathing them in warmth, the piano gleaming as a symbol of their reconciliation. Thomas wiped a tear, his sharp features softened by the scene, his voice a whisper to himself. She's brought us all back. Ayana's small frame stood tall, her blue dress a beacon of resilience, her sunglasses hiding the joy that threatened to overflow, her music a bridge that had turned scorn into understanding. Leonard placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch tentative but warm, the weight of his past lifting slightly under her influence, the boy's words echoing in his mind, a lesson he couldn't ignore. The hall's elegance pressed around them, the chandeliers casting a soft glow, the audience a witness to a reckoning that promised more than just a performance. But could this new bond withstand the doubt still lingering in Leonard's heart? Ayana stood at the edge of the stage, the grand white piano behind her bathed in the fading glow of the London Concert Hall spotlights, the golden light softening into a warm dusk-like hue as the audience's applause dwindled to a reverent hush. Her blue dress swayed gently, the colorful sunglasses on her nose reflecting the twinkling chandeliers above, her small frame radiating a peace that seemed to settle over the elegant crowd in their black ties and shimmering gowns. Leonard stood beside her, his silver hair catching the light, his tall figure no longer imposing but humbled, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, a father finding his place after years of absence. The air carried the scent of polished wood and the faint floral notes of perfume, a blend that mingled with the quiet breathing of the hall, the earlier tension replaced by a fragile harmony. Ayana's fingers brushed the pocket where her mother's music box rested, the star engraving warm against her touch, a talisman that had guided her through the night's trials. She turned to Leonard, her voice soft but steady. I forgive you. The words hung in the air, a release that lifted the weight from her chest, her sightless eyes hidden but her expression open, a child letting go of pain for the sake of healing. Leonard's breath caught, his eyes glistening as he knelt beside her, his tuxedo creasing, his stern facade dissolving into a raw vulnerability. I don't deserve it, he whispered, his voice breaking, but thank you. The crowd watched, their murmurs fading, the chandeliers casting a gentle glow over the scene, the piano a silent witness to their reconciliation. Ayana reached into her pocket, pulling out the music box, its chipped edges and faded paint a stark contrast to the hall's grandeur, and wound the tiny crank. The lullaby began to play, its haunting notes filling the space, a melody that had once been her solace, now a bridge between past and present. Leonard's hand trembled as he reached for it, his fingers brushing the star engraving, a memory of the love he'd once given, the daughter he'd mourned. The music box's tune softened the air, the golden light dimming as if the hall itself held its breath, the crowd leaning forward, their eyes reflecting the emotion unfolding before them. Ayana placed the music box in Leonard's hands, her small fingers lingering on his, a gesture of trust that spoke louder than words. It's yours too, she said, her voice a whisper that carried the weight of forgiveness, the pain of her past transforming into a new motivator, a promise to create music together. Leonard's tears fell, silent drops that traced paths down his face, his arrogance washed away by the melody, by her grace, by the sun he'd rediscovered through her courage. The boy from the second row, his oversized tuxedo still slipping, stepped forward again, his small frame illuminated by the fading light, his voice timid but clear. Can I learn that song? Ayana turned toward him, her smile widening, the boy's innocence a spark that reignited her resolve. Yes, she said, we'll teach you. Leonard nodded, rising to his feet, his hand still clutching the music box, his eyes meeting the boy's with a newfound gentleness, a lesson learned through Ayana's forgiveness. The crowd sighed collectively, their earlier disdain a distant memory, the hall transforming into a space of renewal, the chandeliers twinkling like stars at dusk, the piano gleaming as a symbol of their shared journey. Thomas Reed emerged from the wings, his sharp eyes softened by the scene, his gray suit wrinkled but his smile warm, his voice low as he joined them. "This is what music's for." Ayana's heart swelled, the music box's lullaby weaving through the moment, a painful object now a source of connection, a bridge to a future she hadn't dared imagine. The golden light shifted, the spotlights dimming to mimic the end of day, the hall's elegance wrapping around them like an embrace, the scent of wood and perfume a backdrop to the healing unfolding. She stepped closer to Leonard, her small hand finding his again, her voice steady. "Let's play it together, for her." Leonard's nod was almost imperceptible, his tears drying as he moved to the piano, his fingers hovering over the keys, the music box resting beside him, a talisman of their past, a motivator for their future. Ayana sat beside him, her small hands joining his, the lullaby beginning anew, their duet a harmony of forgiveness and redemption, the notes rising and falling like a heartbeat, a cinematic crescendo that filled the hall. The crowd rose again, their applause a gentle wave, their faces reflecting the emotion of the moment, the boy clapping with a grin, his mother wiping a tear, the woman in the third row nodding with approval. The chandeliers cast a soft glow, the piano's keys glowing under their touch, the music a testament to the healing Ayana had sparked, the bond she'd forged with her father, the hope she'd given to a child. Leonard's playing grew stronger, his arrogance replaced by a tender strength, his eyes meeting Ayana's with a gratitude that needed no words, the lullaby a shared gift from the mother they'd both lost. The hall held its breath, the air thick with emotion, the golden light fading into a warm dusk, the piano a silent partner in their reconciliation. Ayana's smile deepened, her small frame filled with a quiet joy, her sunglasses hiding the tears of release, her music a bridge to a future where pain could become strength. The boy watched, his eyes wide, his small hands mimicking the keys, a new musician inspired by the scene before him. Leonard's hand rested on hers as the final note lingered, a promise sealed in sound, a healing that transcended the night's wounds. The crowd's applause swelled, a gentle rhythm that underscored the moment, the hall a sanctuary of renewal, the chandeliers twinkling above like a blessing. But could this newfound harmony hold against the challenges still to come? Ayana walked back into the grand concert hall, the same London stage where her journey had begun, her small frame now a familiar silhouette against the velvet curtains. The golden chandeliers above cast a warm glow, their light softer now, reflecting off the polished wood of the grand white piano that stood center stage, its keys gleaming with the promise of music yet to be played. Her blue dress swayed gently as she moved, the colorful sunglasses on her nose catching the shimmer of the lights, a symbol of her resilience amidst the elegance of the crowd. The audience, once a sea of judgment in their black ties and shimmering gowns, now greeted her with warm smiles and soft applause, their faces lit with admiration rather than scorn. Leonard followed closely, his silver hair glowing under the spotlights, his tall frame no longer imposing but protective, his tuxedo slightly wrinkled from the emotional weight of the evening. His hand hovered near Ayana's shoulder, a father's instinct to guide, to shield, a stark contrast to the arrogance he'd shown when they'd first met here. The air carried the familiar scent of polished wood and floral perfumes, but the atmosphere had shifted, the hall transformed into a space of acceptance, the earlier mockery replaced by a collective reverence that hummed through the crowd. Ayana paused at the edge of the stage, her fingers brushing the piano, the same instrument where she'd been humiliated, where Leonard had dismissed her as a charity case, now a symbol of their shared redemption. She turned to him, her voice soft but clear. "We're back where we started." Leonard's eyes softened, a faint smile breaking through his once stern expression, his hand finally resting on her shoulder, a gesture of connection that spoke louder than words. "But it's different now," he said, his voice steady, carrying the weight of their journey, the truth she'd revealed with her music. The crowd settled into their seats, their murmurs a gentle hum, their eyes reflecting the golden light, the chandeliers above twinkling like stars in a night sky. A woman in the front row, her gown shimmering, leaned forward, her earlier laughter replaced by a nod of respect, her companion whispering, "She's extraordinary." The boy from the second row, his oversized tuxedo still slipping, waved shyly, his small hands clutching a tiny keyboard, a gift inspired by Ayana's performance, his mother smiling beside him, her eyes glistening with gratitude. Ayana's smile widened, her small frame filling the stage with a quiet confidence, her sunglasses hiding the joy that sparkled within her, the memory of her mother's lullaby a steady pulse in her heart. She sat at the piano, her fingers hovering over the keys, the same keys she'd touched when she played the lullaby that unveiled her identity, the melody that had brought Leonard back to her. Leonard sat beside her, his hands joining hers, their duet a silent promise, a continuation of the healing they'd begun. The crowd leaned forward, their breaths held, the golden light casting long shadows across the stage, the piano a bridge between their past and present. Thomas Reed stood in the wings, his sharp eyes softened, his gray suit a quiet contrast to the hall's grandeur, his smile warm as he watched the scene unfold, the manager who'd suspected the truth now a witness to its fulfillment. The first notes of their duet filled the air, a gentle harmony that wove through the hall, a blend of Ayana's lullaby and Leonard's skill, their music a testament to the bond they'd forged. The crowd listened, their earlier disdain forgotten, their faces reflecting the emotion of the moment, some closing their eyes to savor the sound, others nodding in quiet approval. The chandeliers twinkled above, their light softening the edges of the hall, the scent of wood and perfume a backdrop to the melody that united them all. Ayana's small hands moved with a confidence she hadn't known before, her music a declaration of her place, not just on this stage but in Leonard's life, in the world that had once dismissed her. Leonard's playing complemented hers, his once arrogant flair now tempered by a tenderness that spoke of his growth, his fingers tracing the keys with a reverence he'd never shown before. The boy in the second row mimicked their movements on his tiny keyboard, his small fingers awkward but determined, his mother whispering encouragement, her hand resting on his shoulder, a mirror to Leonard's protective stance. The duet swelled, the notes rising and falling like a heartbeat, a cinematic rhythm that filled the hall with warmth, the golden light shifting to highlight their shared connection, the piano gleaming as a symbol of their journey. The crowd's applause began before the final note faded, a gentle wave that grew into a roar, their hands clapping in unison, their faces a gallery of admiration and gratitude. Ayana turned to Leonard, her smile radiant, her voice a whisper over the applause. "We belong here together." Leonard nodded, his eyes glistening, his hand squeezing her shoulder, a father's pride shining through, the hall's elegance wrapping around them like an embrace, the chandeliers casting a soft glow over their reunion. The woman in the front row stood, her gown catching the light, her applause leading the crowd, her earlier judgment replaced by a respect that radiated through the hall. Thomas stepped forward, his sharp features softened by the moment, his voice low as he joined the applause, a silent acknowledgement of the transformation he'd witnessed. Ayana's small frame seemed to grow under the crowd's gaze, her blue dress a beacon of resilience, her sunglasses reflecting their newfound acceptance, her heart steady as the music lingered in the air. Leonard's hand remained on her shoulder, his presence a shield, a promise, the stage where she'd been scorned now a place of triumph, a full circle that spoke of healing and hope. The hall's grandeur pressed around them, the chandeliers twinkling like a blessing, the piano a silent witness to their return. But what deeper truth might still emerge from this moment of unity? Ayana lingered on the stage, the grand white piano behind her glowing under the soft golden light of the London concert hall, its keys still warm from the duet she'd shared with Leonard. The crowd's applause faded into a gentle hum, their elegant figures in black ties and shimmering gowns rising to their feet, their faces alight with admiration, the earlier mockery a distant memory. Her blue dress swayed as she turned, her colorful sunglasses catching the twinkling chandeliers above, her small frame a beacon of resilience amidst the hall's grandeur. Leonard stood beside her, his silver hair glinting, his tall figure softened by the tenderness in his eyes, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, a father's touch that spoke of their newfound bond. The air carried the scent of polished wood and lingering perfume, a familiar embrace that wrapped around the moment, the piano a silent witness to their journey from scorn to reconciliation. Ayana's fingers brushed the pocket where her mother's music box rested, the star engraving a quiet reminder of the lullaby that had changed everything, its melody still echoing in her heart. The crowd began to file out, their whispers of awe mixing with the rustle of fabric, but a small voice cut through the stillness, drawing her attention. The boy from the second row, his oversized tuxedo slipping off one shoulder, lingered near the stage, his tiny keyboard clutched to his chest, his eyes wide with wonder. "That song," he said, his voice trembling with excitement, "it's the same one my grandma used to sing before she left us." Ayanna tilted her head, her smile softening, the boy's words a mirror to her own past, a connection that deepened the night's meaning. Leonard's breath caught, his hand tightening on her shoulder, his mind racing as he recognized the lullaby's reach, a melody he'd written not just for his daughter but for a love that had touched others too. The boy stepped closer, his small shoes scuffing the carpeted aisle, his mother hovering behind him, her eyes glistening as she nodded in silent agreement. "She said it was special," the boy continued, "like a star that never fades." Ayanna's heart swelled, the star engraving on her music box flashing in her mind, a symbol that now linked her story to this child, to a grandmother's memory, to a legacy beyond her own pain. The chandeliers twinkled above, their light casting a gentle glow over the scene, the hall's elegance framing the moment like a final frame in a film. Leonard knelt beside Ayanna, his tuxedo creasing, his voice low but clear. "It was for you, and for her, and for anyone who needed it." His eyes met the boy's, a shared understanding passing between them, the arrogance of the maestro replaced by the humility of a father, a man who'd learned through his daughter's grace. The crowd thinned, their footsteps echoing as they departed, but the boy remained, his small hand reaching out to touch the edge of the stage, his keyboard a testament to the inspiration Ayanna had sparked. She reached down, her small hand meeting his, her sunglasses reflecting his eager face, her voice a whisper. "Keep that song alive." The boy nodded, his mother smiling through tears, her hand resting on his shoulder, a silent promise to nurture the gift he'd received. Thomas Reed emerged from the wings, his sharp eyes softened, his gray suit a quiet contrast to the hall's grandeur, his smile warm as he watched the exchange, the manager who'd guided Leonard now a witness to a deeper truth. The piano gleamed behind them, its keys silent but potent, a bridge that had united a father and daughter, a child and his past, a hall and its redemption. Ayanna rose, her blue dress swaying, her small frame filled with a quiet joy, her heart steady as she turned to Leonard, her voice soft. "It's bigger than us now." Leonard nodded, his hand still on her shoulder, his eyes glistening with the weight of her words, the lullaby a gift that had rippled beyond their story, touching lives he hadn't foreseen. The hall grew quieter, the chandeliers casting a final glow, the scent of wood and perfume a fading backdrop to the moment's intimacy. The boy stepped back, his mother guiding him toward the exit, but his voice lingered, a final echo. "I'll play it for her, like you did." Ayanna's smile deepened, her sunglasses hiding the tears of release, her music a legacy that would carry on, a star that never faded as the boy had said. Leonard's hand squeezed her shoulder, his posture straight but softened, a father proud of the daughter who taught him more than he'd ever taught her, the hall a sanctuary of their shared triumph. The last of the crowd departed, their footsteps fading into the night, the golden light dimming as the staff began to clear the space, but Ayanna and Leonard remained, the piano between them a silent partner in their journey. She pulled the music box from her pocket, winding it once more, the lullaby playing softly, its notes a farewell to the pain, a welcome to the future. Leonard's fingers joined hers on the keys, a final duet that sealed their bond, the melody rising and falling like a heartbeat, a cinematic close to their story. The chandeliers flickered, their light a blessing on the scene, the hall's elegance wrapping around them like an embrace, the boy's words a deeper meaning that lingered in the air. Ayanna's small frame stood tall, her blue dress a beacon of hope, her sunglasses reflecting the fading light, her heart full as the final note faded. Leonard's voice broke the silence, a whisper that carried to the empty hall. "You've given me back more than I lost." She turned to him, her smile radiant, the music box resting between them, a talisman of their past, a promise for their future. The hall grew dark, the chandeliers extinguished, but the star in her pocket, the song in her soul, remained. "The stars will guide us home."